We're going to continue our study of high Renaissance painters with Raphael. And Raphael was perhaps the most popular artist of the time. While we'll look at Raphael's work before that of Michelangelo, the point should be made that Michelangelo, and Leonardo as well, were significant influences on this student of Perugino. With Raphael, we again have an example of the student far surpassing his master. Let's contrast Raphael's Marriage of the Virgin on the right with one of Perugino's major works, The Delivery of the Keys, seen on the left. Through a vertical format, Raphael creates an incredibly deep sense of space, which gets lost in the horizontal expanse of Perugino. The figure groupings are stronger units. In Perugino's work, the groups seem merely to be a collection of single figure studies. And Raphael also constructs greater depth through his use of atmospheric perspective, which is barely hinted at in Perugino's work. Raphael also animates the ground plane with color divisions, as opposed to the slavish linear division of the ground plane in Perugino's work. Raphael learned the lessons of his teacher well, but he was not content to repeat them without thought. Like Leonardo and Michelangelo, Raphael's fame has rested largely with one image, that of the School of Athens. However, the most persistent image of Raphael's career was that of the Madonna. Leonardo's influence is immediately apparent in this Madonna with the goldfinch, in the manner in which the pyramidal composition is employed. Compared to Leonardo's Virgin of the Rocks, we can readily see that Raphael had little use for the perhaps overly dramatic chiaroscuro that characterized much of Leonardo's work. One criticism, perhaps, of Leonardo's figures is that he often could not let simplicity creep into his work when appropriate, as Leonardo believed in twisting his figures as much as possible, and he turned the volume up on their emotional and expressive character. By contrast, there is a quiet dignity to Raphael's figures that's not always found in the work of Leonardo. Another Madonna from about the same time demonstrates Raphael's highly developed sense of color, in a similar composition to the Madonna with the goldfinch. This is called the Madonna del Granduca. Raphael depicts the Holy Family here as being healthy, beautiful human beings. Yet when his work is contrasted to that of Fra Filippo Lippi, who certainly loved human beings, there is no mistaking the holiness of Raphael's figures, with which he has imbued a certain serenity and deep sense of integrity, and perhaps even purpose or resolve. Leonardo's work was shrouded in mystery, as was he. Michelangelo's work was overwhelming, even moving Raphael to alter his style, and it revealed the bluster of Michelangelo. Michelangelo and Leonardo were solitary geniuses who despised one another and their work, never missing an opportunity to criticize their rival. Michelangelo, for that matter, did not spare Raphael either. He accused him of stealing his ideas. Raphael's Madonna reveals a sociable and approachable figure, described by Vasari as being so gentle and charitable that even animals loved him. It is easy to see in a painting such as Madonna del Granduca why his reputation was so great in his day, and this reputation persisted until the late 19th century. As a matter of fact, he was regarded by virtually all critics as the greatest painter who ever lived for some 350 years after his death. The influence of works such as this is immediately apparent in the paintings of Poussin and Ingres, two great French painters to come, but an overreaction against academic painting in the 19th century pronounced Raphael's work as being sweet, and today this seems ludicrous when viewing his work. It is little surprise, then, that Raphael received one of the most important commissions of his time, that of painting the papal apartments of the Vatican, a task that had already been begun by the artist Sodoma, whose work we see here. Sodoma was a competent artist whose work is rather busy. Sodoma got his name because Vasari said he liked little boys more than was decent, despite the fact that virtually all the evidence points to the contrary. Raphael set brick walls in front of Sodoma's work, at least some of which was unfinished, and this was a terrific move on the Pope's part, as one of the most exciting fresco cycles of all time was the result. The four walls that Raphael was to cover represented theology, law, poetry, and philosophy. First to be carried out was the disputa, or disputation, over the sacrament that we see here. It is the most complete exposition on the sacrament in Christian art, as we see it traced from its origins in heaven. Compositionally and theatrically, this painting is a marvel. Raphael expands the dome shape of his Marriage of the Virgin and makes the vast horizontal composition effective, as the semicircle of figures on earth echo the dome shape of the painting, and they are contrasted by the curve of the figures in heaven. And this contrast is made even sharper with Raphael's depicting the earthbound figures as being much more active, as opposed to the peaceful serenity shown above. So this painting is terrific in both conception and execution. Facing the Disputa, then, is the School of Athens, a work whose title is misleading, as it dates only as far back as the 18th century in reference to the painting. The School of Athens was intended to be a celebration of great human minds, designed to confront the theologians of the Disputa. Perspective here is mastered completely for its purpose, that of creating a believable, if not buildable in this case, space for the figures to move and interact in. There are many recognizable portraits in this work. One such figure was not initially planned, as revealed in the cartoons for the painting. One figure seems to stand out in some ways. In the center left foreground, a man is rather self-absorbed, writing. He's dressed differently in that he's less elegant, and even modeled with more mass and power than the other figures. Who could it be? Remember, working only a few feet away behind locked doors was Michelangelo. Raphael either sneaked in to peek with Bramante, as noted by Vasari and no doubt accused by Michelangelo, or saw it with the rest of Rome in 1511. Either way, Raphael was never the same in style afterwards, and he chose to pay tribute to the master by including him in his masterpiece. Who else is in the painting? At the center of the painting are the two major philosophers of antiquity, Plato and Aristotle. The brilliance of Raphael's color is also a major feature in this work. Included in the painting was a self-portrait. He's the figure second from the right toward the background, and a portrait of Sodoma at the far right. I wonder how Sodoma felt about his inclusion or tribute when it was his work that was being covered up. Now, Michelangelo's influence on Raphael becomes even more apparent in Raphael's Galatea. A new weight and musculature is evident in these figures, whose color also no doubt drew from what are now the newly revealed colors of Michelangelo. Compare the back of the boogeyman in the lower left to Michelangelo's figure of Adam to see Raphael's newly inspired interest in anatomy. This painting was commissioned by the papal barber to decorate his newly built palace with mythological themes of the loves of the gods. It sounds a little like the church's money was invested in Sin City. The far-reaching influence of Raphael can also be seen some 80 to 90 years down the line in the work of Carracci. Raphael was also a terrific portraitist. Baldassare Castiglione posed for him, and in some ways here we see the birth of the modern portrait in this penetrating study which seeks to get at and reveal the heart of the sitter. In this sense, Raphael shares much in common with a later painter named Rembrandt. Raphael, who we see on the left here, was rich, famous, and honored when he died at age 37. Vasari said the Pope wept bitterly, having planned on making him a cardinal. His unfinished Transfiguration that we see at the right stood above his bier at his funeral services, calling an end to his life and a beginning to his legacy. Mannerism took a great deal from this image, as we shall soon see. We're going to look briefly now at some other painters of the High Renaissance. Andrea del Sarto was an artist with a terrific sense of color. And again, we see the pyramidal composition that was typical of the time. The subtle gradations of color in his work are beautiful. The robed figure on the left reminds me of some of the color treatments of Chardin, an artist we'll look at later in the semester. I wish we could see his color transposed into fresco. And this was one of his chief accomplishments which set him apart from many of his contemporaries. Del Sarto is remembered chiefly for being the teacher of Pontormo, Rosso Fiorentino, and Vasari. Therefore, he is considered to be a forerunner of mannerism. This painting is The Assumption by Correggio, and lots of action and movement set Correggio apart from the cooler and more detached sensibilities of his contemporaries. 160 years later, his influence pops up in frescoes by Fra Andrea Pozzo. Correggio was also an imaginative, if moderately dirty old man, as his Jupiter and Io suggest. Skillfully painted, yet a crazy idea. What would the kids have looked like? Note particularly the different use of color inherent in the two media of Correggio's work here. It's much more full-bodied in this oil painting, as opposed to the fresco of The Assumption. And this concludes our look at Raphael and some of the other painters of the High Renaissance as we get ready to move into Michelangelo.